Hello everybody! In today's video we are going to continue with our series on the history of Islam, and today we are going to talk about the Quran, the holy book of Islam. We are going to talk about the reading of the Quran, the history, the compilation of the text, how it happens. And regarding the text of the Quran, we have to say, first of all, before we get into the topic, is that in Islam, Judaism and Christianity are considered revealed religions, meaning that according to the Islamic view, the text, the holy books of the Jews, the Torah, and for the Christians, the Gospels, are considered to be also revelations of God, coming from God, and therefore the Christians and Jews are considered the people of the book. They're called the people of the book. And it is, of course, all within the context of the monotheistic religions, coming from, or all tracing its roots back to the father of the faith, as it is called, the Prophet Abraham. And within this line, therefore, we have the revelation of the Quran, the holy book of Islam. And because of this, then Muslims are also, should be also called the people of the book. Because the Quran is considered by Muslims the last message from God to humankind. And in this respect, having this in mind and understanding, then we are in a position to understand why the necessity of a revelation at the time when the Quran was revealed, how it happened, how it was compiled, and about all of this we are going to talk today. First of all, the Quran was revealed to the Prophet Muhammad, who is considered in Islam as the last messenger sent from God to humanity. The message of the Quran was revealed in Arabic, as the Quran states, in clear Arabic, meaning in your language, because it was revealed historically speaking, in Arabia, within the Arabic community, and later on, of course, today has been expanded. And the message reached to Arabs and non-Arabs, and so it's for all humanity. Regarding this, the message was revealed within a period of 23 years. That could be divided between the time the Prophet and the community was in Mecca, and we have some first revelations there, and then after the migration, Akhirah, to the city of Medina. Then we have other revelations there, and both revelations combined over a period of 23 years compiled the Quran that we have today. Regarding the message of the Quran, the content of the Quran, we have to say that in agreement and in relation with the monotheistic religions, as I mentioned, Judaism, Christianity, and even other previous revelations and books, that we know that there is a long chain of prophets and books that some of them are even lost, or prophets that we don't even know. But within all this context of the Abrahamic faith, the message of the Quran is similar to that of the Torah and similar to that of the Gospels. And therefore in the Quran we have stories of the same prophets that we find in the Torah: Abraham, Jacob, Moses, Noah, and many other prophets, Jesus, Mary. So it's a combination of topics and prophets and their message according to what we have in the Jewish scriptures, the Torah, and also in the Christian scriptures, the Gospels in this case. The Quran also, of course, deals with historical events that happened in the life of the first community in Mecca, later on in Medina, and these are historical events that shaped the development of the community in the early stages. The Quran also explains matters related to the practice of Islam, rituals, things that are permitted, things that are forbidden, and other topics related to with the structure and how the religion should be observed. What is expected from the believer, from God, the things that the believer, the Muslim, is supposed to do, what he's not supposed to do, etc. All is connected with all these historical events that the text also describes for us that took place in the beginning of Islam. Therefore, as we notice, the message of the Quran is clear, but at the same time it's not that simple and easy just to grab the text, and someone who doesn't have any previous background knowledge of all of these that I have just described, and therefore commentaries were needed, because for the average person who doesn't know all of these things, the Arabic culture or the context, the purpose of the revelation, or doesn't even know neither the context of, let's say, what was in the Torah or in the Gospels, that the Quran talks about these things, therefore training is needed. But also interpretation was important and necessary, especially for the future generations up to our very days. And that's why many scholars delve into the study, the interpretation, the analysis, in order to grasp, to understand the meaning and all the historical context. And that's why within Islam a new science was developed, a new science appeared, and it's the science of the Quran studies, which is the commentary and the analysis of the Quran. And we have many famous commentaries, very great scholars, and we have of course the famous tafsirs of commentaries, how they are known, Ibn Kathir, At-Tabari, and others, who are very famous commentaries on the text of the Quran, for a clear understanding for the generations of Muslims that came later on up to our days, after so many years of the revelation. Therefore, it was needed, even in our modern day, it is needed some kind of explanation. That's why the experts, the jurists, the ulama, the ones who are in charge of explaining some difficult topics that sometimes the Quran is not clear enough, sometimes the hadith, the knowledge of the hadith, which is the traditions, the deeds of the Prophet, all that he did and taught, and so all of this must be analyzed, combined, and explained for the common people, for the common believer. And that's why the expert, the ulama, are the ones that have through the years study and compile and explain all of these topics. Also, we have to say that the revelation of the Quran to the Prophet Muhammad was through the angel Gabriel, and we have stories that tells us how this revelation happened, how he was in a cave meditating, and then the circumstances that took place, and how this first revelation occurred. And of course we know the famous passage in which he heard a voice telling him, recite in the name of your Lord, and a series of details. But the important point that I want to emphasize, because this has been explained in many other books and there are many videos about it, but the point that I want to emphasize is the text of the Quran had to be memorized by the Prophet. Whatever the angel revealed to him, he had to commit the text to memory. And we have to remember that it is said the Prophet didn't know how to write or read. Therefore, memorization was important. He had to memorize the text, and then he taught this message to his disciples, his closest companion followers, and they also have to memorize the text. And this was very important for the preservation of the message of the Quran in the beginning. And we know that there are traditions that says that the Prophet used to review the angel Jibril, or Gabriel used to appear to him, and every year during the month of Ramadan, the Prophet had to recite the Quran from memory and review it with the angel Gabriel. So we have here like we could call it like a mystical thing, no? Like an angel appeared to the Prophet, and they both reviewed the text, studied together, and clear understanding was more emphasized also in the mind of the Prophet, that such message then was transmitted in a reliable way to his companions and followers. After the death of the Prophet, then the text needed to be written down, because many people don't know that when the Prophet was alive, no text was written yet. The revelations were memorized, and that's why after so many battles in the beginning, in the early stages of Islam, many of the great companions of the Prophet were dying in battle, and people were afraid that when someone dies, then the revelations die with him, because all is in his mind memorized. And that's why the importance to write it down. And also sometimes some of the companions knew certain parts of the revelation that others didn't know. Why? Because sometimes the Prophet had a revelation and he explained it to the people who was with him in that moment. But whoever was not there couldn't memorize it yet. We're talking, this is the very, very beginning. And then sometimes he was in another place and he revealed something, someone else was not there. So many people have certain revelations here, certain revelations there. So everything needed to come down together and put it in one book, especially, as I emphasize, after the death of the first companions. And that's why, after the death of the Prophet, during the time of the second Caliph, Umar ibn al-Khattab, the second Caliph of Islam, it was necessary to write down the message of the Quran, because not only the ones who have memorized the text were dying in battle, but there were many people bringing new ideas and in certain revelations and things, and therefore things needed to be clarified. And then it was a very important companion and the number one memorizer of the text, and the personal, we could call it scribe, the personal secretary of the Prophet, Sa'id ibn Thabit. He was called upon, and with some other scholars later on, but first he was called and he was given the task to write down and to compile the text. So he had to gather now the knowledge from the different revelations and from different people and put it down, the text of the Quran. Now it's very important to know also, not many people know about what happened with Sa'id ibn Thabit. There was some contradiction, some problems, let's say, with members in the community, because after he compiled the text, some of the companions and some people in the community were not kind of happy with this first, let's say, if we want to call it in this way, let's say the first draft of the text. And some people were not happy with this, and they start talking certain bad things. Let's say, no, we have to do this again. Let's bring other scholars, and let's have a group, because they said that when Sa'id compiled the text, he was enclosed in a room and no one saw what he put, what he didn't know. Some people were distrusting his first compilation. This is a reality. This is a historical fact. It's in the books. People don't talk about this too much, but scholars that we study these books, we know these things from history and should be taught, should be explained also. Therefore, some people also claim, well, he is a Muslim, but Sa'id also, he was a Jew before, and then he said, well, a Jew, he became Muslim, and people were kind of distrusting him, even though it was recognized that he was the number one memorizer, the one who knew the text by heart like no one else. Like I said, he was the personal scribe of the Prophet. He was with him all the time. But still, some people say, let's bring a new group of scholars to finally put it down, write it down. Now, by this time, the second Caliph Omar had died, and the first group of, let's say, the first draft of the text was, I think, in the hands of one of the daughters of Omar. And by the time of the third Caliph, Uthman ibn Affan, then a group of scholars was called, among them, of course, Arab from Arab tribes, etc. And then, of course, Sa'id was called again, because he was, of course, so knowledgeable, and Sa'id with a group of other scholars from other Arab tribes. I cannot judge why they were distrusting him, because if he had Jewish background or whatever, the reasons people had. This is just what happened, and I'm just explaining what happened. The thing is that a new group of scholars came, people from who have memorized the text, and from different tribes also. They came together with him, and then finally compiled the whole text, and finally we have that the text of the Quran that we have today is the text that was disseminated and spread by the time of the third Caliph, Uthman ibn Affan. Also, to emphasize that at the time of the second Caliph, Omar, all their previous texts of the Quran that were circulating among the community were gathered and they were burned and disappeared from history. We don't know what these pages said, because like I said, some people say, oh, I have this revelation, and some people were not kind of trusting this. It's complicated matters that need further explanation. But the thing is that the text that we have today of the Quran all over the world was compiled within 20 years of the death of the Prophet by the closest and trusted companions. Therefore, it's very close, only 20 years after the Prophet had passed away, and this is the same text that we have until this very day. And of course, it took 2 stages of compilation, put it down and bringing all the people who have memorized it, scholars, experts, and they wrote it down. For us, as they had memorized it from the teachings of the Prophet, and as he received it from the revelation from the angel Gabriel, according to Islamic tradition. And this is the whole stage of how the Quran was compiled, and therefore also, like I explained later on, the science of the Quran appear, how to interpret, how to grasp the meaning, historical context, and many other topics. These are these things that I have just revealed today. Not many people know them, but they are there. Whoever just deals and read the books from Islam, I'm talking about Islamic sources, from the previous historians, At-Tabari and others, they explain all these things. And these are things that are not really well known, but they should be explained also, and should be said how things happen, because these are historical circumstances, right, in the early stages of Islam, the very beginning. But with total confidence, we could say that the text of the Quran that we have today is the text, exactly the same text that was disseminated by the third Caliph Uthman ibn Affan, just 20 years after the passing away of the Prophet Muhammad. So in the next video we are going to explain then about the Hadith. What is the Hadith? What is the context of the Hadith? How it was compiled? Different sources, etc. And this is all related to the historical context of the early beginnings of Islam, the Holy Book of Islam, the important scriptures, etc. As always, thank you so much for your attention, and God willing, we'll see each other in the next video.